Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to IPDay's Webinar Wednesdays. We're happy to have all of you join us today as we dive into taking a closer look at implementing the CCRS ELA standards in where? No better place than the classroom. I'm June Rawl, your IPDay Director. First off, we want to let you know as instructional leaders how much we appreciate your commitment to improving higher standards in the ABE classroom. Your effectiveness in the classroom yields stronger student outcomes and helps students learn the skills they need for college and career preparation. This vision yields a tremendous benefit to all of our students that we teach, and we thank you very much for that. Our webinar today is facilitated by no strangers to us in adult education, Bonnie Gooden and Susan Pittman. Their perspective and their knowledge offers us a quick snapshot of some effective strategies that can assist us in measuring our students' progress and help them set milestones along the way. You'll find in today's webinar that Bonnie and Susan have prepared resources and materials that you can immediately integrate into your classroom. We thank them so much for that. We hope you enjoy the webinar today and are able to tap into the rich, relevant resources that are made available for you through IPDay. Stay tuned, stay connected, and thank you for joining our vision to improving higher standards in the classroom and transitioning our students past adult education into credit-bearing post-secondary options and/or occupational training. On behalf of the Florida Department of Education and IPDay, welcome to the webinar. Bonnie, Susan?
Thanks, June, and we're glad to be with everyone today as we look at digging just a little bit deeper into the college career readiness standards that Florida has implemented this past fall actually, in adult basic ed. Today what we're going to talk about is we're going to very quickly review the key shifts in those ELA standards just to make sure we're all on the same page. And then we're going to talk a little bit of how we're going to measure and monitor our implementation progress. Remember, as we're implementing the ELA standards this year, math is not too far behind. We're also going to discuss how we evaluate success by checking against some clear milestones. And then, as always, having some tools that we can use in developing our lesson plans and checking on our progress. Like all webinars, this specific webinar will be posted in 24 hours on the Florida IPDay website. If you have not downloaded the PowerPoint, as well as the resource guide of programmatic tools that go along with today's webinar, they are also available on the Florida IPDay website, as well as they should have been attached to your invitation to today's webinar. So as we start talking about the lovely standards that we have for ELA, we do know that the major objective is that we need to know where our students are, and those standards are going to tell us where our students should be. And then, of course, it's going to be our job in the classroom and as programmatic leaders to determine how we can identify the ways that we can get students there. It's important for all of us to remember that the standards do not tell us what to teach, when to teach, but rather give us those overarching standards that tell us, again, where students should be once we're done. But before we get started, since this has been an ongoing process implementing Florida's college career readiness standards, Susan, let's get started by taking just a very quick poll to see who we have today and where they're at in implementation.
Okay, and so many of you are really old hands at this poll stuff, so we hope everybody's going to be responding as we go through. So first, we're going to ask you, who are you? Who's joining us at this point? So what we'd like for you to do is please select one. Are you a program manager or administrator, an instructor, a volunteer, other professionals? Come on, let's find out who everyone is. And we're sitting right now with 84% have voted at this point in time. Come on, I know we could actually get up even higher. Let's see if we can't make it to 90% as we're going through. So close. Bonnie, we're going to give them about 5 more seconds to get voted, and then we're going to release the results for that.
We only need one more person to vote to get that 90%.
I know. Come on, folks. One more. Just 1% more. Oh, well. Oh, there we get. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so we're going to close this poll now, and let's look at the results. And I'll share those with you. So who is with us today? Well, we actually have a lot of instructors. Bonnie, look at this. Isn't this fantastic? 71% are instructors that are here. And thank you to our program managers and administrators who have joined us, as well as other professionals. We really appreciate that. So, having said that, we'll move on.
This past fall, all of you attended a workshop where you had many materials that you could share with your staff. So we're doing just that quick check-up on how many trainings have you or your staff completed using those CCRS ELA materials that are on Florida IP Day. So if you can click in approximately how many trainings you have done, Susan, start our second poll.
All right, and so now that we know we can hit that 90+% mark, come on guys, let's see what all is going on here. Okay. Oh, we're doing pretty good. We're almost halfway there. And let's see how many training sessions we have out there. A little bit slower as we're moving through this one, but we're getting there, Bonnie.
I really like seeing the numbers so far. We have a great percentage coming on board who have done some of these trainings. Fantastic news.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're at 81%. We're going to give you about 10 seconds more, and we're going to close this poll. So vote now. Don't miss out. Okay, I am going to close the poll, and we're going to share the results. So, Bonnie, isn't this fantastic? Look at this. We have all these people who have done trainings, either 1 or 2. Look at that, 43% of you out there. Another 20% hitting that 3, 4, and wow, kudos to those 10% that's sitting out there with more than 4. So we're hoping that those of you who have not had a chance to do trainings, that as we continue on, that you're going to have an opportunity to do that. So having said that, let me, get to the right place here, and we'll close that out. And Bonnie, where are we going next?
Let's talk a little bit about this one, because it's really important that as a state, we are all not only aware of the fact that these standards exist, but that we're able to apply and experiment with those standards in our classrooms as we develop lessons, we develop units, etc. But we hope that down the road very quickly that many of us truly own the standards, that we're comfortable as we look at our own materials and those materials that are professionally published by our vendors, etc., that we understand how we can incorporate all of those things into our classrooms, and we just automatically do it. Now, we know that a few of you are very innovative, and so that's that final level, really, of change, that not only do we take it, but we go that next step, those next couple of steps, and we innovate with those standards. So having said that, what we'd like to know is which level of change best identifies the staff in your program. Is your staff aware, or are they at that application? They're trying it, trying different ways. Or are they at that ownership? We know it, we're using it, we're integrating it. Or have you really hit that top level of change where not only do you own it, but you know how to take it that next level up? So again, if you will vote, please do the poll of where are you and your staff in implementing the ELA College and Career Readiness Standards for Adult Ed in the state of Florida.
Okay, and so time to vote. Oh, Bonnie, I like what I'm seeing here. I like so much of this with application and experimentation coming in.
I do too, because that's really where I would expect many of us to be at this level, and it's really a positive point of change with, the second largest group being awareness, which again, I'm real pleased to see, because what we want is for everybody to at least be aware and moving towards that application and experimentation, knowing that some of our programs are really ready to own those standards, and even a few of them ready to do some innovation. So let's go 5 more seconds, because I'd like to see us get above that 90%. One more time, Susan.
Okay, come on, folks. Oh, so close. Come on. We just need one more vote, and we can move over that mountain. That's 90%. We have to say that mountain. Bonnie and I happen to be in Colorado right now. So, okay, but we're going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The poll is closed, and let's share the results. And you can see where we stand. Bonnie, I have to say that, we've got a small but I think mighty group out there that's in that advocacy, which is such a great thing, because that helps us as we're trying to move forward and make sure that other people understand what all is going on. But seeing so many people, 54% of you sitting there at application and experimentation, that is fantastic as we're going through to see that result.
Oh, I totally agree, and hopefully, because we have so many at that level and above, what we'd like to know from you is, has your program begun developing some lesson plans or units that do align with Florida's ABE curriculum framework for reading and language? And this is a simple yes or no, even if you started developing one lesson, because remember, the onus of developing the lessons in the curriculum is on each of us in the classroom, not on the, quote, standards that exist with Florida's ABE curriculum framework. So, Susan, let's start this poll and see where we're at.
All right. Yes or no? Are you developing those lesson plans that align with Florida's ABE curriculum framework?
And I really like the numbers that are coming in here as well.
Absolutely. Because this is the step. This is an essential piece within all of that application and experimentation that we have to have as we're moving through. So it's really good to see all the numbers that we have that are coming through here. So we're
I think the other thing is each of us have a different type of population. We are such a diverse state. And so there are many ways to teach to the same standards. And that's why I think it's so important that as we look at our students in our programs, as we look at the needs and the instructional types of our programs, the lesson plans are going to look different from area to area.
Oh, absolutely. And with that, we're going to close the poll and share the results. And what we have is that we're really looking at 3/4 of you out there who really have started that lesson planning process and aligning what you're doing to those ABE curriculum frameworks. That is an absolutely wonderful thing to see as we're moving through. And we know that that number is just going to continuously grow over time as we're working with this. So fantastic. Kudos to everybody out there who's working so hard on these different things.
And just like, and what we're hoping is that as you develop some of these lesson plans, that you'll be willing to share them across the state and put them into Florida IPDAY, because remember, this is for the field, from the field in our website. And so consequently, the last question, and just realize because we are a growing website, what we'd like to know is, have you accessed any of the lesson plans or templates from the Florida IF Day website? And if you have, if you will, click a yes. If you have not yet, click a no for us. So again, we're just kind of seeing whether we're using those resources or we're accessing those resources at this time. So Susan, start the poll.
There you go. And we're going to give it just about 5 more seconds because we have 84% of you who have voted. We'd love to see that number move up just a tad if we could. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, this poll is closed, and let's take a look at the results and let's talk about it just a little bit. So from what we see from our results here, we have about 43% of you who have accessed lesson plans or templates from the Florida IF Day website, with 57% of you saying no. So what we do want to do is share some of those in case some people are just not aware that those resources are there. You know, we have a growing library of resources that are out there. We want to make sure that we spread that word that things are there. So as you're working, we always like to say we don't want to reinvent the wheel, so that you can have access to those different things as well. So having said that, I will close that out. And Bonnie has pulled up, this is from your workbook, and if I remember correctly, Bonnie, it was pages 9 through 15.
And let's talk just a little bit about what is out there for you to use, because you're going to see a lot more lesson plans going up from some of your fellow instructors. And what we've asked them to do is, we know we need to interpret the standards, because that way we know what kinds of activities we can do with our classroom. So what we've provided in your guide is just a sample of the type of things that are out there in Florida IF Day. This is a lesson plan on writing and how you use evidence to support a point of view or opinions, a very important skill for our students to have. And what we've provided for the field is not only how it aligns to the Florida Adult Basic Ed writing standards, but what the level expectations are. And you'll see on this particular page, we've had instructors interpret the standards. Sometimes we call it unpacking the standards, and providing some sample activities. Because there again, the standards do not tell us how to teach or what types of activities or products to have our students complete in order to show that they have mastery of that standard. The other thing in all of the lesson plans on Florida IF Day is they're totally complete for you. Some of our instructors have even developed some PowerPoints so that you can use them in the classroom. But just note that all of the materials, all of the handouts are here for you to implement. And since we know many of our instructors are part-time, and quite honestly, some of us have to teach all areas, and we may not be as strong in some of them, we've provided a step-by-step process for you to go through, as you can see in this sample lesson plan. Everything you need to implement, from scripting to the handouts, are there. And because they are on the website, please note also that there's times that you may want to change them a little bit because of your student population. You are so free to do those things. So if you've not been out there, a couple things for you. First of all, if you're not finding what you need, please communicate with Florida IF Day so that we can provide additional materials. But the other thing is, as you look at them, don't just go out once upon a time, because new materials are constantly being added. So that gives us a little bit of intro into Florida IPDA and a few of the materials that we have there that will assist you in your program to implement these standards. Okay, Susan, let me click back because I clicked a few too many slides.
Okay, not a problem.
So we talked a little bit about those 4 phases of implementation, and as a program manager and as an instructor, just realize that these 4 levels of implementation are necessary for all of us to go into any new activity. So we need to continue to build that awareness so every single educator in our state knows of these new standards and our new curriculum framework in Florida. And then, of course, we have to initiate and implement them. But the other thing we need to continually do is follow up and support our instructional staff and our programmatic staff so that we make sure that as we're developing this curriculum and adopting new resources and assessment strategies, that those are shared throughout the state so that we can ensure success for each and every one of our students in our programs. And then, of course, we have to always do that E word and A word. Evaluate how we're doing and making sure that we're accountable, but also knowing that there's times we have to make changes or revisions so that there again what we're implementing is successful for all of the students that we serve. So as we go through today, we're going to talk a little bit about these standards. So Susan, let's just do a very, very quick review to make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, and I think that's important because we all know, too, that we have new people coming into adult education all the time. You know, we have people who are retiring, we have people who are coming in, we have programs that are growing and changing how they do things. So, you know, this gives kind of a little update for people who've been with us in the past, but this also provides some information for those who maybe this is your first webinar coming into us. Remember that when we look at ELA standards, that we're looking at reading, writing, speaking and listening, and language. And, you know, I know just from past experience that in our ABE programs, and I know it was true as I was working with the ABE students, maybe I didn't do as much speaking and listening as I should have in helping students to gain those skills, because all of that is connected. And so we have to keep that in mind. I know within our ESOL programs, they really work very hard on that end of it, but it's also important for our ABE students. The other thing is that our standards, they can be sequenced by grade levels, which means that they look at a measure of how difficult or the depth or the complexities that are there when we're working within the different standards. The nice thing about our standards and the CCRS is that as we're looking at them, we're looking at this continuum, and that helps us understand those end product expectation. What are we building toward? And, you know, it gives all of us kind of this common direction that we can help build our students and help build the skills that they need. And then again, those anchors are kind of broken down into levels, which they allow us to, you know, look at large groups and how we can work with those. So let's talk for just a minute as we move on forward here about what they're not, because I think, Bonnie, that's a real big issue that's out there, is because we still have some misconceptions when it comes to that. So let's talk about each one of those. They're not an order in which you're to teach these. And these standards cover a lot of different territory, but they're not set up like, oh, day 1 is this and day 2 is that, but rather that you can look at them across the board. They don't tell you how you have to teach this. So it's not a formula where you have to do, you know, open with a certain statement and end with something and do specific things. They don't give you that direction, but they give you that opportunity to open up. They're not a full spectrum of support and interventions for students, so they don't cover everything that is out there. I mean, there are other things that we want to pull in and work with. And The other thing, because this is one that I think maybe sometimes we look at standards and we go, oh, it's a curriculum. No, actually what it is it gives you that broad framework. So you need to complement these with high quality curriculum within your program. That's why we keep coming back to looking at how are you doing as far as putting together lesson plans, how are you doing looking at materials. And they're not a national or federal set of mandates. What they are is really giving us as adult educators that opportunity to provide more for our students, to expand on all those things we've been doing, but to give us some ways to point to say, look, when our students leave our programs, this is what they can do. And there's so much tied into being able to move into the workforce or into maybe technical training. Those are the kinds of things that all of us have as our hopes and dreams for our students to help them achieve their short and long-term goals. So let's talk one more thing. Let's talk about those 3 shifts in ELA, because it boils down to 3 specific things. We want to make sure that within the classroom, as we're working with students, that students are having the opportunity to read texts that are worth reading. Not just some throwaway little paragraph or something, but something that actually is going to help them begin to build not only their reading skills but their knowledge, because we want them to be able to read to learn as we're going forward. We also want to make sure that we are asking questions that are worth answering, that we're having our students dig deeper into what the text is that they're reading, because that's going to be such a useful workplace skill as we're moving forward. And last but not least, it is about work worth doing, not just busy work, not just practice exercises, but things that are going to have an impact on what the student knows and can do as they're moving forward. So that's kind of the mantra that, as Bonnie and I have been doing training in different places, we keep coming back to: text worth reading, questions worth answering, and work that's worth doing. And that is really where we want to pull it all together from that standpoint. So Bonnie, I think you have a new term out there now as we move on to this next one, something called deliverology.
You know, Susan always laughs at me that I come up with new words, but this is actually from research on the World Wide Web. And
yes, well, you do a lot of that research, and you do it very well, but I have to tell you that, yes, I do like the term deliverology. So how about telling us a little bit more about it?
well, we know what delivery means. And so deliverology, as we're looking into our classrooms and figuring out, are we really instituting these standards? We need to always ask ourselves, what are we trying to do? What should be the end result? And then, of course, how are we going to do it? What's our plan? And at any given moment, how are we going to know that we're on track? And if not, if we're not on track, if we've not already started implementing these, what are we going to do about it? And then finally, how can our professional learning community help? And that is what we have through Florida IFDA. We have a statewide professional learning community where we are all learning from each other and integrating things that we learn and definitely sharing what we've learned for best practices. So as we go forward and adapt instruction into our classroom that really is standard-based instruction, this is really the step-by-step. Each of us in our programs need to identify the standards that we want our students to achieve. And by observing those students, we need to identify the level of mastery that they need within each standard and then adjust our instruction. So it presents the content at different levels of cognitive depth and varying levels of complexity. If you've been with Susan and me in different workshops, you know that we believe that there are a lot of strategies and processes that we can teach to all levels, because many of us do deal with multiple levels in one classroom. So we can teach the strategy, we can teach the process, but there again we change the product to meet the different levels that we find within our adult ed classrooms. And then of course we have to assess students' mastery. And that mastery is assessed not necessarily through some type of assessment tool that is produced by a company, but rather the type of assessment tools that we as instructors create. Because we know our students best and we know what types of knowledge that we want students to have. So that really is that step-by-step process of, again, how we adapt instruction. And as Susan said, we must make sure that we integrate those instructional shifts in everything we do. So as you're developing lessons, or as a program manager, as you're walking into the classrooms of your instructors, are they truly integrating those 3 major shifts that we talked about? Are your teachers, or are you as an instructor, focusing on text which is worth reading? Are you doing reading and writing across the curriculum? Because there again, close reading is necessary, whether I'm reading nonfiction text from the workplace or from science or for social studies. Is there a real emphasis in the classroom on informational text and a focus on argumentative writing and doing evidence-based writing? And again, in the classroom, are you seeing collaborative conversation? We should see students talking about things, pulling evidence out and talking about it, listening to others. And again, we definitely should integrate all those media sources and focus on an academic vocabulary. So as we go forward and talk about some things out of the guide and what we should be seeing in the classroom, I want you to think about your own classroom. Or if you're with us as a program manager, think about the classrooms that exist within your programs. And as you're thinking, ask yourself this. When ELA, English Language Arts Standards, are effectively integrated into my planning and instruction, the following is going to definitely be evidenced in each lesson. And in your guide, you have some questions, some graphics, and we're going to talk about those in just a moment. But pages 2 through 6 are going to be extremely important for you as an instructor or for you as a program manager to look at and go a little deeper into it. So, Susan, do we want to look at the guide, or let's click on and go back?
Well, let's click on, go ahead with where we are right now, and then we're going to come back and take a look at that and kind of like talk through the last pieces of it, because
Okay.
you know, as we look at this, and I want people to think about it, when we start talking about so many of these things, we tend to look and say, oh, if I'm going to do complex text, I have to be working with higher level students. And, you know, that's really not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to help students from the very beginning have things that help challenge them and use that term that Bonnie and I have talked about before, that productive struggle thing. But we've got to make sure within the classroom that we have high quality text, or as we prefer, that we have multiple text that are at the center of the classroom. And what we want to make sure is that we have students and they're spending time reading, they're writing, and that last one, which Bonnie was just talking about, that collaborative conversation, that they're speaking about those texts or multiple texts. The other thing we want to make sure is that when students are working with different texts, that we see them not just do a cursory reading, but that they read and they reread, so that we're pushing that level of understanding higher as we keep going. I think sometimes we don't push our students hard enough, and we know that our students are quite capable of doing many different things, but we've got to make sure that we're putting out the materials for them that are going to help with that. And that whatever text we're using, it provides useful information. Students want to see something that's relevant. And that's one of the reasons why Bonnie and I keep going back to there's so much that can be found on the web and that we can use within classrooms. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through, but there are different things that we can access to do that. So let's look at the next piece, which really talks about the questions and the text that we're doing with students. And I think probably for many of us, and I know it was as Bonnie and I were talking about some of this as we were first getting started with CCRS, is this difference that we have in the kinds of tasks that we should be doing and the text-dependent questions we should be asking. We've always taken for granted that, within the materials we use, they have a variety of different levels of questions. But I think it's understanding how important it is for us to keep getting students back to those text-dependent, which helps them be able to identify information, because they're really going to need help in building concepts and ideas and details. We need to have students think about what they've read or maybe what they've heard. It doesn't have to always be something they've read, but maybe they can listen to a short clip. Bonnie talked about multimedia sources. Maybe they hear a short clip and then we have them draw evidence out of that supports the ideas, the things that they've learned. We also have to work on that domain-specific language from text. Across the board, our students are going to have a stronger vocabulary if they're going to be stronger readers as they go through. And, oh gosh, Bonnie, there in that last bullet we have the I word, which is a real challenge for our students in doing that, making inferences. And the way that they do that is to learn how to go deeper into a text and be able to read between the lines. They do it in daily life when they're talking with different people, but they don't always do that when they're reading with text, either listening to or reading text itself. So we have to help build those skills because those are going to be essential as we go through. And the other thing is that all of our students need to be productively engaged in the work of a lesson. I see that word there, persist. We talk about in math, we talk about persevering in order to be able to answer a question correctly in math or solve a problem. Well, the same thing needs to happen within reading and writing activities, that they hang in there with it, that they learn how to master those skills, that we as instructors, that we expect certain things from our students, and that we help students achieve that as they're going through. We want students also to be able to get to the point where they can complete questions or tasks independently. We need to do a lot of guidance up front and a lot of modeling of processes and strategies, but we also need our students to be able to move to that level of independence that's going to take them forward into training, technical training, or into the workplace. And I still think we have to go back to the issue of discussion and collaboration. If you think about what people in business and industry want, they really want employees coming in who know how to do that. And here is our classroom, and it's a wonderful place to have that opportunity for students to build those skills so they can understand what others see and the insights in using evidence. So there's so much that we can do, but it's about having that focus as we're moving through to get them engaged and to get them to stick with it because they need to understand what the advantages are going to be in the long run. Where is it going to have the payoff that they're going to need as they're moving forward?
So Susan, what I'm hearing is, as a program manager, if I'm walking through a classroom then, I should see my teachers using very high quality text where their class time is spent reading, writing, or seeing students speak about that high-quality text, not necessarily the text that just comes on the next page of my workbook. And
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I should hear my teachers asking text-dependent questions, not just opinions, and I should see students who are engaged, where they're reading, writing, speaking, and if I see those types of things, then I know that my program is really getting started in implementing these standards-based education.
Absolutely, because what you should see, and really it doesn't matter, Bonnie, whether we're working with students who are at the lower ABE levels or the mid-levels, we should see these things happening across the board. And, you know, that opportunity to have students talking about a text, maybe not all students in that classroom can read that text independently, but certainly we could work with that text and have the teacher read the text or have recorded the text for the students who are not at that mastery level, but then they could certainly all talk about it and they could answer questions about it. The lower level students having heard the text, the higher level students having read the text. There's so many different things that we can do, and we can do this as a group so that we don't have to say, oh, well, I've got to put, you know, go back to when, I date myself here, we had the bluebirds and the redbirds and the yellowbirds and all these different groups, but I can do stuff together. I just have to look at how I'm going to deliver for my students at different levels, and as you said earlier, that I have a different product or different expectation based on where our students are. But this can lend itself to helping especially our lower level students gain some of the confidence and the motivation because they're not left out of the greater conversations and the more the content that really is necessary for them to grow and learn.
You know, that sounds great. So as we start building our lessons that really integrate with the standards, we really need to, every lesson we develop, reflect on those three shifts. We need to ask ourselves as we're building our lesson plans, is the lesson providing our students with practice with complex text and academic language, regardless of what level they are reading at? And we need to ask ourselves, are we encouraging reading, writing, as well as speaking and listening that's grounded in evidence? Let's face it, that's what our workplace wants us to be able to do. And most of our students are in the workplace in some form, so these are the skills they need, not just to increase their academic skills, but also to increase their workplace skills. And we never have enough time, so our lessons need to really build knowledge, that content-rich nonfiction. In a previous workshop, we talked about a number of websites that have great articles for us to use that are at different readability levels, where again, we can teach the knowledge base, and dependent upon the student's reading level, they can read those nonfiction articles. Because bottom line is, for our instructional leaders as well as our teachers, as an instructional leader, you really do need to know what's happening in your classrooms. It's just an important part of the puzzle of teaching and learning. And so as you are doing the walkabout, are the strategies that you're using, or the strategies that your teachers are using, aligned to these new standards, so that when they are assessed, they have the skills necessary? And do you have that quality information about whether or not changes in the teaching practice are happening before assessments are done, not when assessments are done? Susan and I have been both program managers in the past for many years. And again, although we know that assessment tools help us to build programmatic changes, let's face it, we want to know before those assessments how we can change things. So as you're walking around as a program manager, Make sure that you do see your instructors leading high-level conversations with their students. Now that may mean that that classroom is not always perfectly quiet, and that's wonderful. That your teachers are focusing on process. And Susan and I have said this before, that the processes for close reading, for argumentative writing, are very similar regardless of the grade level at which students read or write. And that the assessments and the assignments really have a purpose. That we're not doing assignments just because it happens to be on page 6 of a book, but rather that those assignments have a purpose so students can say, aha, I know why you're teaching that to me. I'll be able to use it somewhere, and being specific about where that somewhere is. And again, for years, we've been teaching persuasive writing, persuasive speech, and we need to, again, go to much more argumentative style writing, argumentative style speech, and argumentative styles of reading. And as Susan has said many times during this webinar, we need to see an increase in text complexity, because in the world of work, in the world of career tech, many of those materials are written at a high level of complexity. And so students need to be able to challenge themselves to productively struggle and to be able to read those. And again, every instructor should develop and deliver standards-based lessons. That as you're looking at lesson plans, you know what types of standards they are integrating into those lessons. And many lessons are going to have multiple standards integrated because we don't isolate the standards. Anytime I teach writing, I know I'm going to have to teach also some language there as we look at grammar and sentence structure. I also know that I'm going to have to probably put in some reading standards, because if I'm writing about nonfiction, first thing I need to do is write. And we pulled together a writing guide that comes from, it's a tool, and it comes from the College Career Readiness Standards for ELA. And Susan, let's just take a real quick look at that.
Okay.
In your workbook or in your guide, and let me see if I can move this up a little bit. In your guide, in the first few pages, what you'll note, and I'm going to go real quick, I do not mean to make you dizzy, but these materials are for you to use, for you to adapt. They are not assessment tools to assess your instructors on whether they get a certain, quote, grade or score, but it will help you implement the standards more effectively and to, as you walk around, look at how teachers are incorporating them. And if you're a teacher, look at whether you are incorporating these standards. The first tool is getting to measurable, meaningful metrics, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But let's face it, as a program manager, we really need to see not only what we want to observe today, but what we want to observe 5 years from now. And as we're implementing these standards, what kinds of evidence will we need to collect so that we can say, yes, we are in full implementation, or we're not quite there yet? And what kinds of supports and structures do we need? We've just been talking about reflecting on those standards and shifts, and sometimes it just takes a really simple tool like this one, so that as instructors and program managers, we know what it's going to look like or sound like, and what are the challenges that we each have in getting there, and what are the early opportunities we have and early action steps we take. This is going to be extremely important for those of you who have not started fully the implementation process, that you sit with your instructors, and there again, that what you do with them is you outline the kinds of things that you need to do, what are your challenges, and what are those steps to start right away. But the following guide or tool is what Susan and I have been talking about throughout this webinar. If I'm an instructor, I want to take a look at my lessons, I want to take a look at my instruction, and I want to say yes or no to each of those things that we've been discussing. discussing those high-quality texts, discussing the questions that they're text-dependent and how often we're using those, and last but certainly not least, whether our students are productively engaged. And this is just a reflection piece for us to see how closely we are aligned to those standards and how closely we have truly implemented them to the top degree. So Susan, let's go back and finish up with some of the areas that we just want to share, because the last thing really is that data. And we found, this lovely cartoon that really talks about the fact that we don't always have good data, how implementation is going in the classroom, but quite honestly, it can be about data anywhere. So, and since I didn't hear any laughter, we're going to click on. We talked about this guide, and there again, these are questions primarily for those of you who are program managers, instructional leaders, whether you are one of the curriculum instructors, but also for those of you who are in the classroom. Because this is the type of thing that you want to do too, not just what you want to observe in your program, which is a more overarching or holistic look, but in your classroom also, what do you want to observe? Adult ed, we know that we've had lots of changes, but sometimes we're not changing quickly enough to keep up with all the instruction and all of the things that go on around us. Or, let's face it, in career tech, things just don't stay static. So what skills, what structures do our students need as we move forward? So that guide is on page 1, getting to those measurable, meaningful metrics. And so, last but not least, we're going to go to John Cotter, who really does talk. As instructional leaders, we need to create that climate for change. And that first one's really important as we look at the Florida Curriculum Framework. We do need an urgency because those ELA standards do need to be implemented. Why? Math is coming on its heels. And so consequently, we want that nice climate that ELA is there. And as we engage our whole organization, that everyone understands why they need to buy in. It is not just a matter of, it's just another thing coming forth. Bottom line is it's what our students need to be successful. And I think that last one, Susan, is so important, is it's that productive struggle we talk about with our students. Bottom line is we need productive struggle within our adult ed classroom that we don't let up and that change sticks.
Absolutely. Bonnie, I think there's a couple of things here I would say. Yes, we have an urgency because math is fast approaching, but at the same time we have an urgency for our students because the world that they are going out into when they leave our classrooms and the goals that they have don't allow for a lot of time to waste in all this. They need those skills, and they need those skills now. And so I think we really have that sense of urgency there. And, sometimes this, and I should say sometimes, this can be challenging. Pulling in something that is as different as this is and making the changes, but it is about, we ask our students to persevere. We ask them to persist. The same thing has to be said for us. We have to persist as well in making sure that the things that our students need the most, that they're there for them. It's not about us, it's about students. And that is what we're going to keep pounding with all this, is that this is for our students, which ultimately is for our communities, because it can make such a big difference as we're moving forward.
That is so true. And always remember, that road to success is always under construction. So this is not one of those one-hit wonders. It really is an ongoing movement. As you say, it's all about the student, and as the world changes around us, so does our adult ed system.
Bonnie, we have one question that just came in
Great.
from Nancy Schmidt, and I think this is a good time as we're talking about some of these issues. Her question is, can you suggest places to find high-quality text at several levels? And Bonnie, I think you have a place for that, don't you?
You know, there are quite a few of them. In fact, in our last webinar, we gave a whole page of different things, but one of our favorite is News, well, sometimes we call it Newsela, sometimes we call it News ELA, but it's NEWS-ELA. And if you'll go to that website, what you're going to find, you do need to sign in and set up an account, but it's free. You're going to find just so many nonfiction articles which are written at usually 5 different Lexile scores. So when you look at these, I could have a topic, oh gosh, such as when we've had all of those issues with things like Ebola out there. I can teach one nonfiction content area, and I can give at least 5 levels of readability to my students. Now, this particular page of materials, if you want all of them, all of the different websites, if you will go into the last webinar that Susan and I did, you will see that there is a full page of those kinds of materials. But to get you started, Newsela is a great website to get multiple levels of readability of nonfiction text.
And
Plus,
and Bonnie, if I could interrupt you for just a second.
Sure.
One thing I'd like to say for, and Nancy, I appreciate the question because, you know, that's always the issue is where can I find the right materials. Something you should know about Newsela is the fact that they have a number of different categories, and Bonnie has mentioned a couple of times in here about how we need to help our students build knowledge. They have War and Peace is one of the areas which actually gets into a lot of social studies. They have law, they have money, which again deals with economics. They have 2 categories that deal with science. They have health and they have science. They also have other categories as well, but the really nice thing is it gives you an opportunity to pull current news items, because this is how it's drawn. It's drawn from current news articles that are then adapted into, as Bonnie said, those 5 different Lexile or grade level equivalents. So, you know, they're current, they're of interest to our students who are out there, and it's just a great way to get our students engaged, because that was one of the other comments Bonnie made about making sure we have our students engaged. And how do we do that? We do that by providing them with information that they can use or that has some relevance to them. So take a little shot and go out there and explore the site. I think any of you would be really pleased with it.
Oh, and Susan, remember, many of those articles have text-dependent questions and writing prompts.
Yes, they do. And it's a good opportunity for you to pull an article and maybe even work on your own text-dependent question skills.
And for those of you who have not been with us on the CCRS road, remember that under the ABE highlight or heading, you have a CCRS toolkit. The materials that we're providing today in the guide should be part of your own personal CCRS toolkit as, again, you go forward and implement this new Florida ABE curriculum framework in ELA. But we're not done yet. And so as we go forward, before we finish up for today, just realize there are so many materials out there. Florida IPDA's e-learning center is coming forward with not only a Florida ABE College Career Readiness Standards for ELA online learning, but also a program manager's online course, and soon to be launched somewhere time in the summer, the beginning of the math course. And of course, Webinar Wednesday is going. There will be more grab and goes, more lesson plans that are going to be uploaded very soon. And as we said, coming soon, the ABE College and Career Readiness Standards for Math. It really should be your personal website to go to and find information. As I said before, if there's something you don't find, please connect with Florida IPDAY. Write a note because they definitely always answer. And it just gives you one site to get all of this information. And Nancy, if you do not find, the Newsella like you want to, please click in and we'll send you some additional information. So Susan, having said that, that's a few new tools to use as we're on the road to implementing Florida's new curriculum framework for ABE ELA. Let's open it up just a couple questions as we close for the afternoon.
So if we have some questions, please just post them in and we'll respond to those. As we're doing this and we're waiting on any questions that may come in, what we'd like to do is say thank you to all of you for spending time with us this afternoon and your commitment, which has been shown so obviously by the responses in the polls, to making sure that CCRS is coming into our classrooms on a daily basis. And then, Nancy, thank you so much for your comment. We appreciate that what you learn, you take back and you share with teachers in your department, because that's a part of that advocacy that we were talking about earlier, and getting out that word to everybody. So, Nancy, thank you so much for that comment. We really appreciate it. And any other questions, if we have any of those? If not, Bonnie, I think we've reached our time frame here.
So on behalf of Susan and me, as well as June Wall, we would like to thank you for staying connected and being with us today. And as Susan said, we are always here to assist through Florida IPDAY. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of the afternoon.